what we'll do for view A, start with view A, you want to take the interfacing and apply the interfacing to the fabric, or align them so that you have the non-sticky side of the fabric, of the fusible, together with the right side of the fabric. So this is, I have both the right side of the fabric up and the sticky side of the fusible up, so that the non-sticky side of the fusible is touching the right side of the fabric. And then can pin this in place because we're going to be sewing this. And where we're going to be sewing this is just, actually probably a better place for the pins, is going this way, because for this handle we want to sew just a 1/4 inch seam along the very, very end of these pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and pin and sew both. We have 2 of the main handle pieces for view A, and I'm going to go ahead and sew them both before doing any fusing in the same manner. So again, I have the sticky side up so that the non-sticky side of this fusible is touching the right side of the fabric. Okay, for the handles, it's the same principle where, for the handle anchors, where again I'm taking the right side of the fabric is touching the non-fusible side of the interfacing, and for the anchors we're going to sew all the way down all the sides other than the flat open top. So you can go ahead and place, as many pins as you feel like you need to keep this aligned and sewn well. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for both anchors so that I have them both, again, sticky side up so that the non-sticky side of the fusible is touching the right side of the fabric. So that's what we're going to do for view A. For view B, for the top part of the handle, again, the non-sticky side of the fusible is going to lay against the right side of the fabric. And for this, there are markings on the pattern piece that show us where we start and stop. And those markings have here sort of highlighted in this, in this blue markings, and essentially we're sewing from the start and stop of where there's this little divot in the pattern piece itself. So we're going to be pinning and sewing this seam that goes along like this at 1/4 inches. Okay, and we'll do that on either end of this top handle, and we'll do it, again, with the non-fusible side of the fusible interfacing to touching the right side of the fabric. And for the bottom of the handle B, we don't need to do anything special. This we actually can just block fuse, or fuse the whole thing without any sewing. fusible side to the wrong side of the fabric. Now we're ready to start fusing our fusible interfacing. So for view A on the straps, if you remember, the bottom of the strap does not have any stitching before we start fusing. So I've just put the wrong side of the fabric to the sticky side of the fusible interfacing, and I'm going to fuse it. You want to fuse according to the directions on the fusible interfacing from your manufacturer, because it is different with every different fusible interfacing. But some things that are common to all is that you want to use a press cloth. And in this case, what I have done is gone ahead and put a press cloth down on my ironing board. And then I'm now fusing with the fusible going down, so that any potential stickiness that might be left behind from the fusible interfacing going too far over the edge is going to fuse to the press cloth instead of fusing to my iron. And the reason I'm doing this upside down is so that I'm not covering everything with a press cloth while I'm trying to show you what to do. Typically what you would do is put your fusible interfacing on the bottom, and then your fabric, and then a press cloth, and then fuse with your iron, the press cloth there. But again, you can do it upside down, put the press cloth, in this case, just a sheet of muslin that I keep for this purpose, and you can toss in the wash if it does get sticky. So that is the bottom part of the handle for view A. And then for the top part of the handle, again, reminder that I have sewn the stitching on these ends before I'm doing any fusing, and it's sewn with the fusible side up. So now I want to go ahead and turn this right side out. To do that and to get better points, you can trim some of the fabric off from right near the points. That will help make things as sharp as possible. So we'll do that and get that little bit out of the way. And then I'm going to turn this side right side out. This is where having some sort of sharp object, I have this little pokey thing that goes on the end of my finger that works really well for getting in there to turn points out. Some people use their seam rippers. I don't like using my seam ripper because I have accidentally cut through my fabric before using that, and that's kind of a bummer, so I like to use something a little bit less sharp. So there I have gone ahead and turned that right side out, and I want to do the same thing with the other side. So again, just trimming off a little bit of fabric next to each of the points so that I can get a sharper crease when I turn it right side out, or a sharper point. There are other tools you can use to turn things right side out. Just a little turning stick. This is a sewer's multi-tool. I'm not ever quite sure what all of its many uses are, but it just, anything that, it's got this nice little square end that really gets into those corners. And some of the definition that you can get to make these really sharp points will actually come from when you sew it on. If you sew a really crisp line, it will help these to look even crisper and more square than if your stitching is a little loose. So some of that crispness that you might want can actually come from when you stitch this on. But now I've gone ahead and turned this piece right side out. And again, I'm sort of fusing this upside down because I put my press cloth on my ironing board. But now that I have this turned right side out, I can go ahead and press. I start by pressing the ends that we have just turned right side out. And something to remember when you are pressing your fusible interfacing onto your fabric is that you never want to move the iron back and forth. You never want to push on the fabric at all while you're fusing. It's always just place it down, let it rest for a minute, and then move it. Now that we've gone ahead and done that, I can sort of just help pull these corners out with our fingers and go ahead and now I can fuse the rest of this piece of fusible interfacing to my fabric. And if you're not super careful when you fuse things, you can see here, it seems like I've sort of fused this tiny bit of corner of the fusible to itself, but that's going to be within our half-inch seam allowance that's on this most of the rest of the pattern. So it's, you know, I'm not super worried about it. You want to make sure that whatever setting your iron tells you to use on your fusible interfacing isn't too high for the fabric that you are using underneath it. So, you know, if, for example, you happen to be sewing with a polyester or something synthetic, or even, you know, some sort of blend, that would be a much lower setting than you might want for then your instructions might tell you that the fusible interfacing can handle, but you don't want to go, you know, so you never want to, you always want to pick the lowest setting if you're ironing together different kinds of fabric. So if you're, again, if your fashion fabric requires some lower setting than your fusible interfacing, make sure you go with the lower setting. So there's the other part of the strap, strap A, fused together. And so for strap B, we have 4 pieces that we had to sew, and one of them is the strap handle. And for this, remember, it's just the very end of this flat part of the seam, the short ends that I have sewn together. So I can just turn this right side out and make sure I have it end all even. Get this all laid out. Fuse. Some fusible interfacings tell you to use steam, some tell you not to use steam. So again, just read your instructions. Know that, you know, I like to go over it again a couple different times because there are, you know, most irons are not perfectly flat. There are you know, grooves and steam holes and all of that on your iron. My iron's a little messy. It looks like it could use a good clean. But, you know, you want to, so that where it lays may not actually fuse under the entire length of the iron because of those holes and grooves and ridges and stuff. And so going over the fabric a couple times will let you make sure that you've covered all of the fabric. So also with some fusible interfacings, they might actually sort of buckle and wrinkle. You can see here I might have gotten a little bit too hot on it, and it's really hot to the touch. So, you know, again, check your settings, but some fusible interfacings can actually buckle and wrinkle and look like they're not fusing until, if they're really hot, until they start to cool. And then when they cool down, the sticky part of the fusible interfacing will actually cool down and stick to both. So that is something to know, that you can actually, I sort of overheated it in this instance, and I can kind of press out some of those bubbles. And as you see now, as this is cooling down to a touchable level, those bubbles that were in there are gone, and this is actually fusing now to itself. So it's a sign that I could turn down my iron a little bit. It's probably crept up to too hot while I've been doing this. But every brand of fusible interfacing and every piece of every different line is gonna act differently. So just again, pay attention to your instructions. So I want to do that to both of the straps for view B. Sorry, for view A. I've been telling you all this backwards. I started with view B, now we're going on to view A. And I'm going to treat here this, the anchor for handle A like I did the end of the strap for handle B. So now I've finished fusing all of the strap pieces. So we have the anchors sewn and fused for view A, as well as the two handles where the ends were sewn and then the rest of it was fused. So that's view A is now ready. And same thing for view B, where we sewed just the ends and then fused the handle top. And there's no sewing on the handle bottom, so just went ahead and fused without any sewing for the handle bottom. So if you're going to strengthen your fashion fabric by interfacing, this is when you would do that. So I am going to go ahead and interface the front, back, both sides, bottom/sides, and the front inserts. And this is, again, you can follow the instructions on your fusible interfacing for how to fuse, but I went ahead and cut the pieces out of both the fabric and the interfacing, and I'm then fusing them together. You can also block fuse things, and what that means is to actually fuse your fabric to your interfacing together sort of as they're uncut, and then go ahead and cut your pieces. And that takes, it has the benefit of being sort of one less step. You don't have to cut each shape out of both of your fabric and your interfacing, but it does end up using up more interfacing potentially. And it can also be a little more complicated if your interfacing and your fashion fabric are not the same width. So you can see I'm sort of moving my iron all around. It may look like I'm gliding it, but I'm actually not. Anytime I'm moving the iron, I'm picking it up just a tiny bit so that you're not pushing on the fabric with your iron, because that can push the interfacing out of place. So just sort of learn to, barely pick up the iron. So you may not be seeing it, but I just want to make sure to point out that I'm actually picking it up in between moving it every step, so that you don't push the interfacing out of alignment with the fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and finish all of the fusing, and then we can move on to marking the marks on our fabric pieces.